Hello everyone, my name is Felipe, and as you can see, we are back. So this is part 2 of 3 of the setup guide. So the support's been amazing in the last video. So let's go for part 2, shouldn't we? And then in this video I'll show you the geometry, suspension, brakes and tires. I know I've said I would only show you the geometry and suspension, but I've decided to make it everything. And then yeah, the last video is basically gonna be about everything else, like most of the tracks, how to set up a really good race setup. So it really depends on everyone's driving style, but I'll show you what to change and how to make a race setup, which is really been around the comments because I've read it, and then we can really see, okay, so how could I change a time trial setup for a race setup? And that's the basics about part 1 and part 2. And now part 3, it is gonna be interesting because it is about most of the tracks, so I think most of you are gonna like it. Now let's go. I'll show you the basics about the setup. So I've already shown you the wings, the transmission, the geometry is in this video. So you have the camber and the toe. Suspension, you basically have suspension, anti-roll bars and ride height. And about the brakes, also you have the pressure and you have the brake bias. And the tires, you can adjust each one of them to your preference. So let's go for camber. So what it basically does is when you go for the left on your front camber, you get more stability, but you get also more tire wear. So when you go for the right, you get more turning, a little bit less stability, but you get less tire wear. So that's good. That's the basics about the front camber. And about the rear camber, as much as you go for the left, it's exactly the front camber going for the right. So you get turning and you get less tire wear. So that's what I would recommend you. Right, left for the camber. And about the toe, it actually keeps changing because when you go for the left, it's more like the car is easier to drive because it doesn't have that bit more of turning, and yeah, it might not overheat easier. So when you go for the right on the front toe, you might overheat a bit easier, but it's fine. It's just a minimal adjust, something to change just a little bit on the car. And the rear toe, it's basically the rear camber. Just let it to the left, and yeah, you have more stability than going for the right and less tire wear also. Now suspension, you can see if you go to 1 on the front suspension, you get a lot of turning and less stability, but you really need turning from suspension, so I would recommend you to use 1 or 2 at least, at maximum 2 actually. And the rear suspension is exactly the opposite, so when you go for 1, you don't have any turning on the car and you have a lot of stability. So now going for the no, actually, if you go for 11 on the rear suspension, you have a lot of turning, especially turning, because the anti-roll bars works the same way, but it actually works a lot better on traction. So whenever you get on traction, the anti-roll bars are the biggest difference. When you are feeling like, okay, I'm losing traction, just go down by 1 or 2 clicks on the anti-roll bar, especially the rear one. It's gonna make a big difference. And about the ride height, as much as you go for 1, you will have a more responsible car, but it's actually not good on curbs where you really need to jump it. And the rear ride height, I would recommend at least 6. It's the minimum because you can jump every curb on every track quite easily. So I'll show you later also in the video much about it. And the brakes, I would also recommend you to use around 90 to 100. So if you are using 90, you will have the same as 100, but you can save a bit more of VRS, which is really important, especially in the game, which you can overtake a lot of people, but in a DRS terrain you can't. So that 5 or 10% more DRS can be decisive. So yeah, try it 90 if you are just turning off your ABS, and try 100 if you are, you know, if you are already used to it. And about the brake bias, it is quite simple. As much as you increase it to 70, you will have a lot of brakes on the front tires, and that's not good because it will understeer a lot, especially in low speed corners. So I really like to use around 53 to 56. It really depends on what you want on the race, because you can change it on the race as the on-throttle differential. So 56 if you wanna save the rear tires, and 53 if you wanna save the front tires, because you brake more with the rears and everything else. And about the tires, you can change their pressure, and as much as you go for the maximum, you will get more turn in and more stability also, but you also get a lot of overheating, so that's not a good thing. You really need to work on tires on this game to not overheat, especially at Zandvoort, as I will show you now, Hungary, this kind of tracks which you already had overheating on F120 2020, and now you have a lot more, you know. So in this video I'll show you how to go from, for example, 107 degrees at Zandvoort to 103, which is like the maximum you really want to have in a race. 103, 104 net maximum. Then you start losing grip, and that's not optimal, you know. So let's go. I showed you the time trial setup, which is really aggressive. So he's using Barry, is the world record holder, and he's using 1110 wings, which is aggressive because we're not using 11 at a track you really need stability on the rear. And yeah, about the suspension, he's using 2735, 35 I believe is the anti-roll bar, and the right height is 27. So you can see my first lap, it is a 15.2, which is not fast, I can say you, but it is okay. You know, it's just the first race, you don't know what it is gonna be the times when you go for a race setup. And now the second lap, 12.1. And the most important thing is about the tires overheating. So you can see their temperature there, 102 degrees. And as it is a really oversteer setup from time trial, as usual, you will feel a lot of overheating on the rears, especially the left, because this track has a lot of turns for the right, so the left tires suffers more. You can see lap 3, 105 degrees already, but I've improved my lap, so I'm getting used to all that oversteer, but that's not good for the tires. You can't save them a lot. You can see now 106, 107 going out of that corner. Yeah, 107 now. So it's not good. And you can see my lap time already. 4 attempts down on my personal best, which I've just set. So those were the first 4 laps of that race, and now I'll show you a new setup. 10-11 wings, 57 differential, which is one more than the last example. And about the geometry, I've increased toe, the front toe, because it gives me more turning, a little bit more of yeah, overheating, but it's just a little bit more, you know. It won't make a difference because the geometry is just about the tail. So when you already have a good setup, you can change geometry. If you wanna have a bit more turn-in, increase front toe, and if you wanna have a bit more stability, decrease front toe and increase rear toe. So that's gonna be just a little tip for you, because I know it's really hard to change a setup when it's already really good. So if you wanna make just little differences, make sure to change that, because geometry, I wouldn't change the camber, like it's ever right left on the front right and on the rear left. And about the toe, it really changes with the track. So if you wanna have more turn-in, if you feel like the car is not really stable, and yeah, it's understeering a lot, you need to increase the frontal. And now let's go for the end of the first lap of this new setup, which is quite understeery compared to the other one, because I've decreased the anti-roll bars, which make a big difference on traction, so mostly the car will understeer, and you can already see my lap 14.7. So that's really quick for a first lap. It's half a second faster than that oversteer setup, just because it's more understeery and it's more stable, basically. So a setup you really want for the race is a more stable one, which you can really sand it and have no problems with overheating, especially at this track, which overheating is quite common. And yeah, you can see I changed also about the tires. So I changed the tires for maximum at the right tires, and the middle, I think it is 21.5 at the front and 22.2 at the rears, and not at the rears but at the left tires. And it makes a big difference, you know, because tires is really important. If you feel like you are overheating some tire, like as you can see, like 103 degrees on the front left, and I've just set it on 11.6, which is exactly 5 times faster than my last race with a time trial setup. If you are using like a tire which is like maximum every time, you will overheat it. So when you are overheating the tire, make sure to decrease the tire pressure on that tire, because you can change it individually. So change your brake, not the brakes but the tires, the tires for the race. Think about the race, not only qualifying. Make sure to practice race also, that's really important. And you can see now my tire temperature is 104 at the front right, and 99, 100 on the rears, and that's actually really low on the rears. So I have a lot of understeer on this setup. And now I will only change 2 things, basically, going from 57 to 55 on the transmission. And on the suspension, I will go from 2.8 to 2.7 right height. So it's basically gonna do what it's basically gonna do, let the car more stable and more setup for the race. And you can see now 14.9. It's not as fast as a 14.7, and it's not as low as a 15.2, for example. It's just a setup to be fast every lap, and not only the first laps or the last laps of the race. You know, you really want to keep that consistency. And you can see 110 degrees also, but the lap is 11.7, so that's a lot closer to 11.6 that I did last time than 12.1 I did on the first attempt with the time trial setup. And you can see now 105 degrees at the front tires, and it only shows you that this setup is quite understeer yet, so you can go more aggressive and have like 102 on the rears also, and I only have 100, 101, so you can go at maximum at 103, as that's the maximum I would recommend you to race, like a race tire temperature. And you can see now lap 4 11.9, and on the water race I was doing 12.3s with the time trial setup. And yeah, just these basics about the setup. I've changed the tires, I've changed geometry, and I've changed ride height, and it's already feel a lot better. And if you change into roll bar, it's gonna be a lot better, you know. The car is gonna be more stable, especially on the traction when you really need the power on the wheels. So let's go now for friends. This is actually my friend's footage, Vizzy, and he's done this footage to show you what it actually changes, because whenever you think right height, you remember F1 2020, and then you use like 1.3 from right height, and it's really different this game because the regulations changed a lot, and then you need a lot more rear right height, because you need to turn the car, especially in slow speed corners, and this game is also really understeery. So we really need like around 6, 7, 8 rear right height to really help you during the races. Then you won't have understeer anymore, you know. And then whenever you go up, so like 2.7, 3.8, and you go up by a click in the front and on the rears, the car is a lot easier on curbs, but especially on higher curbs, not as in France curbs. So in France you don't need 2.7, you can go 1.6, which is the lowest I would recommend you to run, 1.6. Because you don't have a lot of high curbs. You can see that was a 27 high, 0.8. And now he's gonna change to 1.6, and the car is gonna feel a lot more responsive and easier to drive also because it's more responsive. That's exactly the word. It's not oversteery, it's not understeery as it was last setup. And you can see this turn he went really wide last lap, and then now he can really handles it quite easily, you know. So just a few changes on the right height. One click at the front and one click at the rear can really solve it. At Spa, for example, you wanna be aiming for 2.7, 3.7, you know, higher, because you really need to attack curbs to be fast. But for other tracks, like for example, Netherlands, you need at least 2 on the front and 7 on the rears, as you really need to attack the curbs. And yeah, a lot of other tracks like Italy. Italy, you have the curbs, but you actually have a lot lower curbs than Spa, and then you can run maybe 2.6 and not 2.7, you know, because you won't have a lot of curbs to jump with the car, and that's gonna help you a lot in the race. When you are trying 1.6, you might jump some curbs and then you're gonna lose time. And then you can see this lap, it's a high 0.4, so he's gained 4 times just by changing one click on the right height. So that makes a big difference, you know. So yeah, now that I've explained what geometry does, which is the basics, and just little details, everything else. The suspension also, I've said you that suspension is all about the turning, and anti-roll bar is all about the traction and how you feel the car in slow speed corners. And the right height is especially on curbs. When you go over it, you kinda need to feel what you need to change. And about the brakes now, I'll show you an example. I'm gonna use 50% of brakes, so 50 on the front and 50 at the rear, and that's the usual we used on the last game. And you can see it's not bad, you know, at this chicane at least it's not bad. But I've braked a lot in a straight line, so now I'll brake while I'm turning in, and you can see I'm sliding everywhere, and that's not good. I'm obviously in time trial, so it doesn't affect tire temps, but now you can see 55, that's so much stable. Actually I have a little bit of understeer on the exit, so I can use 54 maybe. Now 60, you can see on the fast corners it's quite decent, and on the slow corners you can feel the understeer, which is bad, you know. You don't really want understeer, and you don't want understeer and oversteer also. So you can see now I changed to 70, and it was quite terrible also. So what I would recommend you to use is around 54 or 55 for the race. And if you need to save something like the front tires, use 53, and if you need to save the rear tires, use 56. That's the tip I'd like to tell you. And now you can see we are at Netherlands again. This is my friend's footage, and he's gonna show about the tires again. So it's really important to rethink about it, because tires is really important. You can't really run at maximum, and you can't really run at minimum, because at minimum you won't have a lot of turning, it doesn't help the car to turn in, you know. It's exactly the opposite of the last game, F1 2020, where you used to use the minimum at every track. You didn't even think about changing it. And in this game, you really need to change it. Like in Hungary, where you can overheat the left tires, exactly the same as Netherlands. You can change only the left tires, and then it's gonna help you a lot in the race. So now going for the end of the first lap, you can see 110 degrees, and now at the end of the fourth lap actually, it's 107 degrees, and the lap times are not good also. So in the end of the lap 5, you can see it is 106, 105, and the pace has dropped quite a lot. You can see now the race director. It's a 0.2, 0.4, 0.9, and 0.4, only the 12s. So let's now change the setup, going for a more race setup. You can see he's changed from the maximum at the front tires to 22.6 and the maximum to 21.1 on the rear left tire. So it is gonna make a big difference, because I was only overheating those tires, the left ones, and now you can really see. I'm gonna go through some laps, show you how stable it is actually. It's not understeering, it's not oversteering, it's exactly the same example I've just shown you. But it's really important to see it again, because it can make you winning races or losing it, you know. Now it's time to rethink about everything I've already shown you while I'm doing these laps. I showed you about the geometry, which was a really important part to change when you already have a really good setup, and about the suspension also. I talked about it a lot, and I'd like to talk a bit more about the brakes relation with the off throttle differential. So when you are running around 54 off throttle, which is already really low in this game, you need more front brakes, because this is gonna help you with the stability. And then if you are running higher off throttle differential, you really need lower brake bias, because like off throttle differential and brakes is the everything which works when you are off throttle. So when you are not on throttle accelerating the car, you really need to run a quite not aggressive off differential, and also not really aggressive brake bias, which can make a big difference, you know, because you can feel the car more stable in the race. And also you can see now the tire wear, not the tire wear, but the tire temps, 102 degrees on this last lap, and it was 105, 106 the last lap of the last race. And you can see the times now: 0.9, 0.1, 0.0, 0.2. So we've gained on the first and second lap around 3 temps, and on the fourth lap, where we had 107 degrees, we've gained around 4 to not 4, actually we've gained around 4 degrees on tire temps from 107 to 103, but we've gained 8 or 9 temps. So that's a lot of time, you know. And if you make that up every race, every lap of the race, you will gain an advantage on your on your other opponents, you know. And that's just making you faster and faster. I went half a second faster than second lap and the first lap also. So it's really important to break the DRS, because then you can make your own race and doesn't really need to be worried about strategies and everything else. You just do your race when you are totally on control of your race, you know. So I really hope this video has helped you, because I've explained everything I know about the setup. So the relation with everything about the other thing. For example, the brakes and the off throttle differential. As yeah, I had a tip from Paris to talk about it because it's really important. You know, you really need to. If you change something, you need to change another thing, and then go out on track and test it out. And if it doesn't work, you just go back and then change another thing. Setups is just about this. You know, you go on track and then change something, and then if it's not good, you change another thing. It's just about knowing what you are changing. So that's why I made this series, so you have a good baseline for what you are changing. And now that's pretty much the video. So make sure you like it, you subscribe to my channel, and I hope everyone likes this video because it's been a really long one, and yeah, it's really complicated to do this kind of videos, you know. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. I will actually let the link below to my Twitch channel so you can see my live streams there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll say it again, and make sure to also share the video to your friends, people you wanna help to get faster in the game. And yeah, see you next video. Part 3 is coming up. Bye bye.